When you think about World War II, you probably picture epic battles, tanks and soldiers. But what if the war's most profound impact wasn't actually made on the battlefield? What if it was made in the factories, in the national budgets, and on the balance sheets? That's the incredible story we're going to unpack.
Yeah, it's a bold question, for sure. But it really gets to the heart of how this massive conflict didn't just redraw maps, it totally rewired the entire global economic system. It's what created the world we're all living in today.
Okay, so to really get this, you have to wrap your head around the sheer scale of it all. The numbers are, and I mean this, just staggering. It's unlike anything the world had ever seen before or has seen since.
I mean, just look at this jump. In World War I, which was already a massive war, countries were putting about 40% of their entire economies into the fight. By World War II, that number rockets up to 60%. Think about that for a second. More than half of everything a country produced, from cars to food to clothes, was being funneled directly into the war machine. This wasn't just war anymore. This was total economic mobilization.
And the human cost? Well, it was just as overwhelming. The best estimates we have put the total death toll somewhere between 70 and 85 million people. That number is so huge, it's almost impossible to really picture. It was about 3% of the entire planet's population at the time.
And this is where the story gets even grimmer. This chart reveals a really dark feature of modern total war. Unlike a lot of older conflicts, it was the civilians who bore the brunt of it. For every one soldier who was killed, 2 civilians died, whether from bombs or starvation or disease. The war wasn't just happening between armies anymore. It was being waged on entire societies.
So the big question is, how on earth do these countries manage this all-out economic effort without just completely imploding? Well, the answer is in this really crucial difference between a managed economic mobilization and just total chaotic collapse.
You basically had 2 models. On one side, you had the victors, the Allies, and even Germany for a long time, who ran a controlled economy. They used careful planning, price controls, rationing, and they made these big social deals with labor to keep things running and keep inflation in check. But on the other side, in places like China and parts of the Eastern Front, the war kicked off a chaotic economy. The state just collapsed. You got hyperinflation, famine, and basically the only law was the survival of the armed. So the key takeaway here is that victory wasn't just about military might, it was a stunning feat of economic management.
This quote just nails it, doesn't it? It perfectly captures that central paradox of the war, at least in the West. You have the most violent event in human history happening right alongside this unbelievable level of collective top-down management. An explosion, yes, but somehow a controlled one.
Okay, so when you shake up the entire economy like this, it's not just about money and factories. It has these huge social consequences. It completely changed the balance of power and wealth inside these countries. So who actually came out on top, and who lost out in this great rebalance?
Well, economists have a name for what happened. They call it the Great Compression. You see, the sheer demand of total war meant governments had no choice. They had to create these new social contracts. To keep factories humming and prevent strikes, they had to give big concessions to workers. And the result was this dramatic narrowing of the gap between the wealthiest and the poorest.
And this table, wow, it really lays out just how dramatic this flip was. Before the war, you had weak unions, lots of unemployment, while the rich enjoyed low taxes and a huge concentration of wealth. After the war, the whole thing is turned on its head. Unions are powerful, you have pretty much full employment, and the richest people are facing these almost punitive tax rates, sometimes over 80%. It wasn't a violent revolution, but it was absolutely a radical redistribution of wealth.
A fantastic example of this in action is something that got nicknamed the Treaty of Detroit. It was this landmark deal between the big car companies and the auto workers union. And it basically set up a kind of privatized welfare state, things like healthcare and pension benefits for workers, that became the gold standard for American industry for decades.
So all these huge shifts, the birth of macroeconomics, these new deals between labor and capital, the complete industrial transformation, they didn't just fade away when the gungs fell silent. Nope. They actually laid the groundwork, the blueprint for the modern economic world we're all still living in.
You've got to think of the war effort as basically the biggest industrial policy in history. It just poured unimaginable amounts of money into new tech and new industries, totally transforming whole regions. California, for example, became this aerospace powerhouse largely because airplane production ate up almost half of the entire U.S. war budget. This mobilization also cemented the North American manufacturing hub around the Great Lakes and left behind all this expertise and infrastructure that fueled decades of growth around the world.
And you know what? Its legacy is still incredibly powerful as an idea. Even right now, when we're facing enormous challenges like climate change or pandemics, you'll still hear leaders talk about needing a World War II-style mobilization. It's still the ultimate benchmark for what a whole country can do when it puts its collective economic might behind a single goal.
So in the end, the war really left us with two massive takeaways. First, it showed us how to mobilize an entire economy for destruction on a scale that's hard to even imagine. But second, it proved that massive, society-wide, collective action is actually possible. And that leaves us with one final, and I think really vital question. If this was the blueprint for destruction, could it also be a blueprint for creation?